Money FM 89.3, the best of the afternoon update. The Afternoon Update with Lynlee Foo.
You're listening to Industry Insight, and today we're diving into one of Singapore's most closely watched sectors, real estate. But we're not talking just about prices or property launches. We're exploring how politics and elections impact the market, from sentiment and sales to policies and planning. To help us make sense of all of this, I'm thrilled to welcome Professor Sing Tien Foo, Provost Chair Professor at the Department of Real Estate at NUS Business School. He's one of Singapore's leading experts on housing policy, urban economics and market behaviour. Professor Sing, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Great to have you here. Prof, let's get straight into it. Do elections affect the property market in Singapore?
Yeah, I think in the election campaign, there are several issues that actually will be put forward by both incumbent ruling party and opposition party. The issue can be global or domestic issue. In terms of domestic front, there are also issues about national level issue and also local level issue, which may impact voter residents more directly. When I talk about local issue, since 1990, 2000, the election campaign have been closely linked to upgrading and also the housing issue at the local level. I think that was during the previous Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong. I think he actually put together the upgrading plan together with the voting. If you vote for the ruling party, will actually implement some of this. I think over the years, things have changed. And if you look at 2011 up to election, 2015 and 2020 election, I think the issue has also evolved, because I think 2011 and 2015, the concern is more about the housing shortages, right? Housing prices, because 2011, when the prices shot up quickly, the government actually had to address this issue, and there also some negative sentiment in the market, and among the residents, because they find the prices have gone up too fast and too quickly. So at that time, I think after the election, the Minister of National Development at the time is Mr. Koh, introduced this plan to increase the supply of 100,000 from 2011 to 2015. That was time they tried to actually moderate the imbalances between the supply and demands. And then 2015, again, we see the prices actually have slowed down. And 2020 will be a slightly different problems, because 2020 election is actually coincide with the pandemic. And we also see again the short surge in the demand, where we see there's a mismatch between the supply and demand again. So after the election, I think the government again ramp up the supply, another 100,000 units between 2020 to 2025.
Okay, Prof, just to backtrack a little bit, there is much uncertainty, especially now with the current trade war happening between world powers. Are buyers and sellers more cautious than usual during this pre-election period?
Yeah, I think this is another issue that which is more global. I think the government had to deal with this problem about uncertainty caused by the trade war and the tariffs imposed by the US government. The issue now is actually the uncertainty at the global level. I think buyers have to be more cautious, especially about what would be the negotiation for the trade tariff, and also whether this trade war can actually spiral into an economic recession and the contraction. And this also has impact on the interest rate as well, because I think in Singapore, the interest rate is very closely linked to the Federal Reserve interest rate. So if the interest rate in the US gone up, I think it's not just impact the new buyers, but existing buyers have to also manage their financial costs as well, because when the interest rate increase, I mean, those who are on the floating interest rate mortgages may have to actually manage the higher interest expenses as well.
I assume it's not just buyers and sellers. This has got to impact the investors and developers as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think for developers, I think they also have to observe and also evaluate the situation carefully, because this trade war and tariff have longer implications, not just Singapore alone, but also the entire trade kind of arrangement globally. So if the economic actually contract because people become more protectionistic, then a new policy had to introduce to try to insulate it.
Prof, how do elections typically influence property activity in Singapore?
Yeah, actually, the election campaign have actually evolved over time. I think we look at in the 1990s, 2000s, under different prime ministership, during the Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong time, I think in 1990, early 2000, at the time, I think the election campaign very much focused on the local estate upgrading issue. I think the issue had been contested at the time was actually upgrading program, whether the resident will support the proposed upgrading program, depending on the vote as well, whether residents will vote for the parties and also to support the upgrading program. They actually link the two together, partner them quite closely. And over the years, I think when the main upgrading program becomes less sustainable because of very expensive kind of investment involved, I think government introduced a home improvement scheme, lift upgrading scheme, neighbourhood renewal scheme, a different kind of scheme. The idea also to improve the local housing estate. It's become less kind of used as the political carrot to actually attract vote in the sense, because unlike the earlier years, if you don't vote for the party, you may not get the upgrading program. I think during that time, we do see a clear kind of differences between the ruling party vote and also the opposing party vote in terms of getting the main upgrading program. And now I think the allocation could be more based on the need basis, because if you look at the number of building or HDB block that actually reach certain age, then they will actually have their allocation according to the age of the building and also the estate condition and so on. And in the 2010 years after the subprime crisis, I think the issue become more about the housing affordability issue, because the prices actually shot up quite quickly. So in the 2010 to 2020, I think this is the period where property market experienced a very sharp increase in terms of prices. So government has put in a lot of effort during this period, and a lot of the election campaign has actually focused on housing affordability and housing prices, whether housing prices had increased too fast and people become less able to buy their own house, whether it's HDB or private housing. So during this period, a lot of focus and debate is actually on housing affordability.
Yeah, I remember that there was a turning point for things like stamp duties and loan restrictions as well in 2011.
That's right. I think during this period, 2010 to 2020, government actually introduced about 12 or 13 rounds of cooling measures trying to cool the market. I think that's the priorities, and this housing issue become a contentious issue as among the parties, because everybody is trying to see whether housing prices has increased too fast and too excessive, And because of this third round of cooling measure introduced by governments, I think housing prices have slowed down quite substantially after 2017. But this again, prices surge again before the pandemic. And we see the demands, the pent-up demand especially gone up quickly, and a lot more young couples want to apply for house, and they also face the problems of what we call accessibility, because the application rate has actually increased significantly to about 4 to 5 times. That means every one new BTO flat, there are about 4 to 5 applicants who compete for these houses. So these are the concerns during 2020, and a lot of especially young couples could not apply and get their BTO flat at the time. I think this become one of the issue that has actually affected the ruling party at the time. So from 2020 to 2025, again, the government actually launched another 100,000 of new BTO flats. And that to some extent can also help to moderate the mismatch between supply and demand. So up to last year, we started to see the price has already slowed down, and then the application rate also had dropped significantly from 4 to 5 times to about 1.5 to 2 times. I think this gives the government a lot more room for them to actually plan ahead for future, instead of just focusing on the current housing issue. That's why I think Prime Minister Lawrence Wong in the last budget, looking at not just providing the housing, they also want to actually provide more variety and choices in terms of housing type as well. That's why the new classification of public housing came in. And also there are a lot more focus will be on the issue on demographic, whether it's fertility rate and also the aging issue as well. And it's cover a lot more comprehensive in terms of housing policy rather than just focusing on making sure the housing affordability issue is solved.
Okay. Given current market conditions in the real estate market, how might the upcoming election differ in its impact?
If you look at the current market conditions, the housing problem has to a great extent have been actually much more improved compared to before the pandemic in terms of housing affordability and housing accessibility, because a lot more supply has entered the market. And I think moving forward is an issue about how to improve what we call the inclusivity and also the fairness and also the diversity in terms of housing supply. So this is what the policy has, the major changes has been made in 2024 when the government introduced a new classification system. So I think that new housing classification system plays an important role in actually allowing a more equitable kind of housing market, so that we will be able to see a lot more supply of public housing in the central area and also the prime location. And these prices also have to be priced at an affordable price. I think this is an important policy that actually can help to improve the composition of the housing type and also to ensure more equitable and more inclusive kind of housing.
Now, talking about urban development, election campaigns often bring announcements, new MRT lines, new towns. Do these really affect property values?
Yeah, of course. I think in the last budget, we heard about not just the infrastructure development, they're also looking at enhancing and augmenting the infrastructure capability, in the sense the government announced a plan for Terminal 5, airport extension, and also the port at Tuas, the extension of the port. And all this actually has a longer term kind of impact in trying to improve the Singapore as a hub for logistics and also for export and import. So I think all this infrastructure investment long term, it probably will not take place in the next 5-10 years. Probably you have a longer impact on the economics capability, and not just the infrastructure project for economic. We also put a lot of emphasis on the environment as well, the sustainability, the climate changes. Some of these projects, of course, I think will, when it's implemented, will help to not just strengthen economic capability. You also have impact on the future kind of job, economic growth, and so on. And other than this strategic project, and other infrastructure project will be new HB location or new HB flat and MRT line. The government also announced to build 2 additional MRT lines connecting the north to the south. I think this will again enhance the connectivity. This will actually help to improve the connectivity, and of course the housing prices along this MRT line will definitely benefit from this improved amenity and connectivity.
For those listening, what advice might you have for them if they're thinking about buying, upgrading, or investing during this election year? For people who are buying for own occupational purposes, I think the short-term fluctuation may not be the main barrier against buying this. If they find the suitable housing and the price is reasonable and within the means, I think this election shouldn't have any impact on this buyer, or especially to those who buy for own occupation purposes. I think for investment purposes, those who actually need to borrow money to buy a house for investment purposes, I think given this uncertainty, especially the current trade war and also this tariff issue, is still hanging, and there's still a lot of uncertainty, because every day or every week we see different kind of news coming out from the US and also other part of the world. I think this probably may create a lot more what we call the grey rhino kind of effect. You know there are some big impact, but there are still uncertainty at the moment. We are not sure how things will turn out, because whether the tariff will revise upward after 90 days, or whether they're going to change this tariff or going to keep this at current level or so, and how will this impact the global trade. I think all this have very significant impact on the smaller economic, on
smaller country like Singapore. For investors who take a long-term perspective, I think it's better to be more careful and prudent and not jump into the investment. And
I suppose it's best to have this wait-and-see approach until we see some positive signs in terms of this trade war.
Yeah, because I think all this uncertainty will have impact on the global kind of trade and economic growth. I think the most important or most risky factor is actually the interest rate. The Fed chairman have already made known that they're not going to cut the interest rate at the moment. I think they will have to observe what will be the inflation situation in China, in the US, whether the trade or this tariff will actually cause important inflation into US economics. I think this is something that needs to be monitored carefully. Because if the inflation actually go up in the US, I think one possible effect will be that interest rate adjustment will have impact Singapore mortgage rate as well, because our Singapore mortgage interest rate is closely linked to the US Fed rate. So any of these rising interest rate impact will affect not just the home buyers, but also impact the existing owner as well, especially those who have floating interest rate mortgages. So the mortgages will be adjusted, but this will increase their financing costs and also their mortgage expenses in the medium and long term in the sense.
All right. Thank you so much for your insights today, Prof. Professor Sing Tien Foo, Provost Chair Professor at the Department of Real Estate at NUS Business School. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.